a great pleasure to welcome you all very warmly. It's a rather chilly evening, but I hope that doesn't in any way chill the warmth of the welcome to this, our second biennial lecture in this series. It's the second, and I was just thinking it'd be great, Kevin, if we could have them every year, albeit there's a lot of work goes into...
Sorry, can I just get the ground, please?
There's a lot of work goes into organising these events. And I remember the first in 2012, and I found it really difficult to believe that's already 2 years ago, Alex. I remember it so clearly. I think that's getting older, isn't it? It just, time moves so fast. But that was a really interesting event, and it was great to make that start. And I'm looking forward to hearing tonight's speakers, all of whom are renowned, high caliber, and will be very, very interesting speakers. So very honoured to have you all with us here. Thank you. Looking forward to that debate. That said, I'm therefore not going to take up too much of your time in an introduction, but I do want to say just a few things. And the first is, as you might have noticed, we're now Leeds Beckett University. We've had a lot of names in our nearly 190-year history. So we go back to the early 18th century in delivering education in our city and our region. And throughout all of those different names, and it's a very proud history that we have, there's a thread that connects all of them. And that thread is our absolute commitment to our region, our city, and the communities within that area, and the difference we can make. The difference we can make in our engagement with those communities, because that's why we're here, to work with our friends in the city and to make that difference. We're not just engaging with communities, we are one of the communities. We represent those communities, we're actually one of the communities in the city, and I think that gives us a very special opportunity, actually, to make a difference. We're a large university. We have around 32,000 students and over 3,000 staff. That makes us, by student numbers, one of the biggest universities in the country, and that's a unique opportunity, and with that comes responsibilities, to make sure that we use that scale and we use that influence to make a real difference. And I believe we do, but there's a lot more to be done, and the agenda for discussion this evening is very much a key part of that. We are, as I said, one of the communities in the city, and these outward-facing events, and it's great, I can see there are so many people who joined us this evening for the lecture, and I hope, if this is your first engagement with our university, I hope you're the first of many, because these outward-facing events are very much part of that engagement. And I was very delighted in the summer. We offered and we had accepted 3 honorary doctorates, some honorary degrees, to 3 strong community leaders from the city, from the Muslim and the Sikh communities. And I think that's also a symbol of the way that it's a symbol, it's a really important, tangible symbol of the ways that we do work together. The Race, Equality and Diversity Forum, the Diversity and Equality Team, the Diversity, Equality and the Committee all put a lot of energy into moving us forward on this agenda. It is well known, it is well documented that there are issues in relation to the recruitment, the retention and the progression of BME students and BME staff in the higher education sector. So it's not the proudest of records we have there as a sector in that area, and indeed in some other areas of equality. But for our university, this is a really important agenda. And the momentum that the Forum, our Equality and Diversity team, and the committee give to that agenda is really, really important to us. And I'm personally very committed, but I know all of my colleagues are very committed to supporting those and also to ensuring those groups, Forum particularly under the leadership of Kevin, to make the difference we want to make. At the risk of, and I don't want to risk this because I really want to hear the speakers, but I do think these are strategic issues. You know, these are long-term strategic issues. The way you change these things is by making long-term change. And one of the ways that we're seeking to do that is by piloting the Equality Challenge Unit's Race Equality Charter Mark. So we're one of 32 universities in the country piloting that charter mark. And in doing so, that helps us, it's a template for developing that strategic approach to the kinds of changes an institution needs to make, not individuals, an institution needs to make, to ensure that it offers the best possible range of opportunities and support to all of its citizens, whether students or staff, whatever their background, to progress and to achieve. There's a particular issue with BME students moving through higher education into academia and becoming the role models, the academics of the future, and role models for their students. So there's a lot to go at there. We're very committed to it. We're very committed to our accreditation from Stonewall, and that's something else that we're working very hard on. So I think that's definitely enough for me, but I hope I have at least given you a feeling for the fact I personally have a really, really strong commitment to this agenda, and I have personal reasons for that as well, which I won't go into. I'm delighted that we have Kevin chairing that forum, because he puts a huge amount of energy into it, and very much looking forward to this evening. So once again, a very warm welcome, and looking forward to hearing the speakers and to see how the discussion progresses this evening. So thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Just to let you know what the format for the evening is going to be, if you have a look on the screens, I'm going to say a few words, but after I've said a few words, we are going to invite our resident poet, somebody who I would like to be our resident poet. That's something for us to look into. Khadija Sasay, who will then, after a reading, we will then introduce each of the speakers. So it will be Khadija, and then our first speaker, Baroness Glenys Thornton. If you can see Baroness Glenys just there in the middle. Then the second speaker, Clifford Harding, welcome. The third speaker, Henry Bonsu, welcome. And they will be joined in the panel by Joan Omani at the back end of the session. I've asked the speakers to speak for 15 minutes, and we'll be tight on that because I know that you've all got places to go to after this, with 5 minutes for questions, so that all speak, and then at the end you will have the opportunity to speak with them in more detail and to ask them questions. There's been a slight change to the programme for any of the eagle-eyed of you. Rodney Hinds had to travel for business and couldn't get back in time for the event. So we have a fantastic reserve to pull off the bench, to use a sporting analogy.
Now you tell me, I'm reserved for Rodney. Thanks.
But you know,
the station's there.
I know that Henry's written for The Voice, so he knows Rodney and also knows Inda Hunjan, who's one of the organising group for the Biennial lecture. So we were very lucky that Henry could actually get here, because if you got a sense of his itinerary, it's been absolutely frantic. We asked the speakers to consider the following. They were informed that the event seeks to inform higher education policy and practice in response to a broad range of challenges and issues. Key themes, therefore, include, but are not restricted to, the student experience, the black and minority ethnic success stories in education, the equalities landscape, race inequality in recruitment, selection, retention and progression, race and teaching, race and pedagogy, and challenges in HE and other related issues. We said, drawing on personal and professional experience, speakers are invited to spend 15 minutes sharing their understanding of the wider issues around race equality in education and beyond. Once all of the speakers have had their 15+5, we will then open it to the floor for the panel discussion. We thought this would be a great opportunity to have a dialogue with people outside of education as well as internally. We thought this would be a safe space for us to boost further consideration of race equality and race-related issues for education. For those of you who were here 2 years ago at the inaugural Biennial, you might recognise these objectives. These are the objectives of the Race Equality and Diversity Forum. Are you timing me as well? Just make sure I don't go over us. So these have been finessed a little bit as the forum's moved forwards. And I can tell you now that we discuss a lot of business. We spend an hour and a half in each meeting because we couldn't get the business done in an hour. We have a diverse group of colleagues that join us. The interesting thing is that, though, and this is an observation from a critical social scientist, the white staff are in the minority in that forum, and so I would encourage our colleagues internally to see these issues as pertinent to them as they are to the black staff. So, you know, we're raising awareness around a number of issues at the highest levels. We're identifying targets. We are pursuing a programme of public lectures, and there's already talk about, for anyone who's seen my blog, the notion of not just this 1 month Black History idea, but a full year's programme of activities around these issues. And of course, we want to promote research in this area. I'd be remiss to say that as a professor here. So some of the good news that we've got to share with you since the last time we met. Susan has already talked about our inclusion as a pilot for the ECU Race Equality. That's the Equality Challenge Unit Race Equality Charter Mark. We have also influenced the Leeds Beckett mentoring project, so that there is a particular focus on underrepresented groups, in particular black and minority ethnic staff and women who are also underrepresented in the areas of research. We have a website that's up and running, although most of our web pages are under construction right now because of the Leeds Beckett change. But we have a Race Equality and Diversity Forum website in addition to the other forum web pages. So if you need more information on the Race Equality and Diversity Forum, then have a look for our website. And we have an excellent dialogue with the Equality and Diversity team, which helps to tie us in as staff to some of the inner workings in HR and some of the broader policy landscape. Susan has already hinted at some of the not so good news around student recruitment and retention and so on, so I won't go over that, but we hope to focus Leeds Beckett's response to some of these issues through the Race Equality Charter Mark. At this point, I'd like to introduce Khadija Sesse. Khadija Sesse, also called Khadija George, is a literary activist, short story writer and poet. She's also the publisher and managing editor of the magazine Sable Lit Mag. In 2012, Khadija published Erki, a collection of poems that, I don't know if you've seen some of the books for sale just outside, but if you buy one of those books today, the proceeds will go to Ebola charities. And she is about to release a collection of poetry called The Modern Pan-Africanist Journey, which I believe she'll be reading from today, in addition to the Erki work. So Khadija, welcome.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here and to start the event off.
Thank you very much, Kevin. It's always lovely working with Kevin. As it is with Henry, we're very lucky to have him here today. I don't know anything about Rodney Hinds, but Henry is wonderful. So my first poem, I'm going to read some short, sharp, sweet poems for you. And since we're in an educational institution and we're talking about race in education, and of course we have very different, weird and wonderful experiences. And here's one. and I've left my glasses on the table.
Oh, no. Twinkle.
So they're thinking, oh, she's got to that age, yeah. Thanks. This one is called Vicar's Boy. Tongue pink and hanging out, Peter picked up the scissors we used in arts and crafts class, stuck with chipped bits of pink and blue sugar paper, cow gum and wallpaper paste, and put them to my head. He could only reach the back, so that is where he displayed his artistry. Snip, snip, bald. He rolled my deep, black, crunchy curls around in his hand, as if playing with a kitten. Tired with the pet, he took the glue and stuck them back. Thank you.
Thanks, Khadija. Our next speaker is Baroness Glenys Thornton. Glenys is Labour's principal Equalities spokesperson in the Lords. In 2008, her energies were recognised when she joined the government as a whip and spoke from the front bench on a range of portfolios, including health, education and equalities. Having grown up in Bradford, Glenys has been and remains an activist at local level, both in London and in Bradford. And I can tell you that today she's dashed up from the Lords, got off the train, got into a cab, got here, sat down, had a drink, and now she's going to have to stand up to speak to you. So, so Glenys, welcome.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Actually, I'd have much preferred to hear more of the poetry myself. Yes, I'm Glenys Thornton, less of the Baroness. I'm a plumber's daughter from Bradford. Okay, I grew up in Birmingham. I am indeed the Women and Equalities lead in the House of Lords for Labour. And I'm also a governor of the London School of Economics, which is where I went to university. I'm going to start with a story. It's not my story, which will become apparent, because you asked for stories, so I'm going to start the story. And I'd like to tell you about a boy called Glenys, who was born in 1891 in America's Deep South. Glenys's parents had been slaves, but although slavery had been abolished in 1867, a quarter of a century earlier, when Glenys was born in 1891, his family were poor sharecroppers, which meant they were basically still slaves. And they could be mistreated or murdered at a whim. And many African Americans were indeed, as we know, lynched, murdered because they were black, and because random murder and terror based on race could enslave them. It could enslave them physically and mentally. So Glenys was 14 years old, and clearly he didn't have a great future ahead of him. He couldn't read or write. His education was over before it began. If he was lucky, he'd work as a field labourer for the rest of his life and maybe get pistol whipped every month or so and hopefully avoid swinging from a tree for being uppity. Some of you might remember being 14 years old. I can certainly remember my children at 14 years old. And no doubt some of you deal with 14-year-olds. 14-year-olds need to start, as we know, thinking about their career options and their future. And if they're lucky, they'll have parents and teachers who will help and encourage them and teach them to dream big. Glenys, unfortunately, didn't really have that. His father, Alan, actually wanted him to be a field labourer because he said, quite rightly, really, it was the only job option left open to him. But Glenys said no, he doesn't want to be a field labourer. What on earth do you think you're going to do? Asked his dad. And this illiterate 14-year-old son of slaves says, I'm going to go to university. Of course, his dad goes nuts because it's not an option. It's not even a ridiculous pipe dream. Now, I should say at this point that this illiterate 14-year-old son of slaves was, in fact, my friend Una King in the House of Lords. It was Una's granddad. And that's what's really amazing about him. It is at that age of 14, he ups sticks, leaves home, and walks 300 miles from Florida to a university for freed slaves. But of course they can't accept him because he can't read and write. Anyway, to cut a long story short, he sweeps floors at the university in return for food and English lessons. He does the equivalent of a foundation course, and sure enough, eventually, miraculously, he gets a degree. And here's the incredible thing. Cleland had 7 sons, and he taught them to show respect, but he also taught them to demand respect. One of his sons was Martin Luther King's lawyer. One of his sons was the first black man to run for president. And one of his sons was, of course, Una's father, who was exiled from the United States on the trumped-up race charge for 40 years until he received a presidential pardon from President Clinton. All of the family have paid a high price, but they demanded respect under a Jim Crow system of segregation that viewed them as inherently inferior. But it was their stories that go back to her granddad, some way, somehow deciding he wanted to get an education and go to university. Now, we can't all have that get up and go, but what we all need to do is ensure that in this day and age, all children, especially those from BME backgrounds, are given the inspiration to achieve, even when the odds look enormously stacked against them. So we need to think. We still have a long way to go. Chuka Udoh, who is the Shadow Secretary of State for Business, Innovation and Skills, said last year, when there was an outcry, when research was released showing that out of 18,510 professors in the UK, just 85, one of them being sat here, less than 0.5% were black. He said, "This is shocking and unacceptable. Education is supposed to be the key which unlocks the door to opportunity. And yet for black people seeking to reach the higher echelons of our universities, the door appears to be shut. And for young people looking at education and academia, it isn't the danger that the lack of role models tells them this is not the place for you." Now, I'm proud that my party has more ethnic minority members of parliament than all the other parties put together. And I'm proud that Ed Miliband appointed Chuka Udoh to the Shadow Cabinet, and he appointed, and therefore appointing the first black member of a British Shadow Cabinet. But looking at Parliament, there are just 27 ethnic minority MPs, and if Parliament reflected modern Britain, there should be more than 90. So we still have some ways to go. I mean, I think there are some signs, particularly in education, and your Vice-Chancellor has outlined the things you're doing here that show that things are moving. I mean, for example, they may be moving in Leeds Met, but I think we need to look to some of our Russell universities and our top universities to see that black and ethnic minority people, students are still underrepresented. So in July, Oxford University had an annual access conference they designed especially to support state schools in assisting their students of black and minority ethnic origin to make competitive applications to Oxford. And 140 BME students and their teachers came to London to that event, which was led by the Oxford African and Caribbean Society. My colleague Doreen Lawrence, who you will all know, through her Stephen Lawrence Foundation, supports many students to go into architectural studies. Race for Opportunity is calling for a government review into racial barriers to top jobs, akin to the Lord Davis review into gender, and for 2 words, and race, to be added to the United Kingdom Corporate Governance Code, where it recommends boards pay heed to its diversity, including gender, and we want to add and race to that. And that recommendation follows their review of black, Asian and ethnic minority leadership in the UK, which finds there virtually no ethnicity change in top management positions in the 5 years between 2007 and 2012. In the Labour Party, we have agreed, when we win the election next year, this is going to be one of the things that we will certainly undertake to do. I'm sure that you are aware of Race for Opportunities research, but it does show that the share of BMA people at top management increased by just 0.05% between 2007 and 2012. But the actual numbers of people in top management positions actually decreased from 93,000 to 73,000. In 2012, only 6% of top management positions and 7.9% of all management positions in Britain were held by BMA people, despite the fact that they make up 10% of all the people employed. Sandra Kerr, the campaign director of of our RFO says that by 2051, 1 in 5 people in the UK will be from an ethnic minority background, representing a scale of consumer spending and political voting power that business and government cannot afford to ignore. And I think that is absolutely correct. Now, I mean, I of course am proud as a Labour Party member of our record on race. It's a Labour government. Every single piece of legislation on racial equality, the Race Relations Act, going back 40 odd years, was introduced by a Labour government. And we put race at the core of our primary care services. We set up the Macpherson inquiry after the death of Stephen Lawrence, which exposed institutional racism. And as I've said, we have elected and selected black and ethnic minority members of Parliament and councillors. But we know, and I know certainly in my job, that this is not sufficient, that we cannot possibly rest easy about this. We know that we have to do more. We know that you're over twice as likely to be unemployed if you're black in Britain today. We know that the reported number of race hate crimes has risen year on year since 2011. We held a very successful and very large race consultation event in Parliament a little while ago with dozens of organisations represented there. I don't know if any of your organisations were there. And you know, we wanted to know whether or not we were on the right lines. And from that, a lot of our policy on race to do with police diversity, stop and search, the judiciary, the civil service, having fast-stream programmes, flow from that consultation. It is only a beginning, and I'll just say the final thing that came out of that, and which we have agreed, is that we were very strongly urged, right through all our consultation, is that we need a race equality strategy across government, embedded in the heart of government, and that will be in our manifesto, and we will do it. Thank you very much.
There were some fantastic claims there, some bold claims that I expect that in the panel we'll be able to ask Glenys a little bit more, especially around Labour's promises around ethnic diversity at the highest levels, how to encourage the best of everyone rather than the best of a few, and also how the practicalities of embedding race equality in institutions. So your wish is my command, Glenys. I'm going to get Khadija back to do some more readings.
Another shorty. I've just mentioned the Modern Pan-Africanist Journey book is ongoing. Research and development. There is an event on the 28th. It's okay for me to self-plug, right?
I think you're doing
yes.
it already.
28th, next week, I'm doing an event at Chapeltown Library where I'm going to be reading some more of the poems, which are basically some of my own poems, but also poems from Pan-Africanists, because I was just looking at the poetry rather than just the intellectual side of the poetry. And of course, there are not a lot of women in that whole movement, but there was one woman called Glenys Hayford, and she was very important in the Harlem Renaissance movement. And what I really want to do is really inform, especially young people, just how Pan-Africanism filters all the way down. And Nana Essie Hayford from that esteemed family lives in Yorkshire, and she's going to be joining me and just sharing some of her poetry and her life experiences. I just want, for me, poetry is in our everyday lives. So I'm now making Pan-Africanism a part of our everyday lives. I just want to kind of show how it is there and have some modern Pan-Africanists as well. So that's what that is all about. And it's just been so much fun researching that and seeing what's come out, seeing what is coming out of it. And even other poets like my colleague here who I work with, Cy Murray, he's a very staunch activist, poet, designer, activist, Pan-Africanism. coming out of, even though he's a Pomfretian as well. He's a Pomfretian, Pan-African, Bajan person. It's part of our everyday lives in different ways. Anyway, I'm now going to read this poem called Rice. I'm from Sierra Leone, and rice is our staple food. We eat rice. If we don't eat, there's a statement that goes, if we don't eat rice at least once a day, we haven't eaten. So rice. And I remembered my glasses this time. The first time I went back home, I returned with country rice. Small grains that sifted like tiny diamonds, coarse and flecked with variant browns like gravel. Not like the own brand that sheds milky white starch into water, long-grained, fluffy and soft that we eat on Sunday afternoons. But Mum said, I don't cook that unpolished rice anymore, and threw it away, a bit like our language. Thank you.
Thanks, Khadija. I'm going to try to keep things moving along. I'd like to introduce Clifford Harding. Mr. NK, aka Clifford Harding, is an entrepreneur from Birmingham that successfully developed a method of teaching children their times tables called the Tunes Times Table. This is a unique and innovative way of quickly teaching adults and children their times tables using song, rhythm, movement, and catchy, memorable lyrics. Mr. NK currently tours around UK schools like the Pied Piper of Hamlet, inspiring, motivating, and captivating young minds. In 2013, can I call you Clifford or Mr. NK? Which one do you prefer? Okay. Clifford was presented the Pride of Britain Award. That's when he came to my attention. Was presented the Pride of Britain Award for his achievements in business. And was it Prince Charles that presented that to you?
That's correct.
And the work he's done within the community. Clifford also runs another successful business, NK Creations Limited, which provides children's entertainment for parties and events. So, responding to the information that we sent, the remit that we sent, I welcome you, Clifford. Thanks for making the journey.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Good evening. I'm not here to bore you. I'm definitely not here to bore you. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about my journey. I think my journey is kind of slightly different from everybody else. Any left-handers in the room? I've seen a couple. I always spot left-handers. Okay. Yeah, I always do. Okay. I'll tell you a little bit about my journey. I came from a one-parent family where my mum brought me up. I was the. Can anybody tell me something? What colour am I? Now, what colour am I? I'm not though. What colour is this? And what colour is this? So what colour am I? Thank you. I just wanted to know. Okay, just to show you how conditioned we are. What colour is this? What colour is this? Okay. So what colour am I? So why do everybody call me black? Just a point. Just a point. Just a point. Okay, I'll tell you a bit about me. I was the black sheep in my family, or the brown sheep. I was the brown sheep in my family. I grew up around people who sell drugs, have big chains, have big cars, and do negative things to get them. I was a part of that negativity. I really was. I say the devil had me. He really did. I'd say the negativity had me all the way. Why? People ask, why ask? I think sometimes because I never had a role model in my life. I had nobody in my life to look up to except for my granddad. He was a man, a woman, he was everything to me. But they passed away. So when I was growing up in Birmingham, and I grew up in London too, I left school at 16 with no qualifications. When I was in school, the teachers used to say I was disruptive. Let me tell you why. Because of this left hand. I used to sit in a class, okay, with a right-hander next to me. And I used to say to the teacher, "Sir, can you move them?" "No, Clifford, you disrupted my class." So I said, I'm not going to do no work, because I'm asking the teacher to move the gentleman next door to me, or the lady next door to me. Wouldn't happen. So I'm always doing this. So I'm like, move out the way, move out the way. Teachers there labeling me disruptive, rude, bloody. I said, I'm not rude. All I want is to feel a simple thing, if you can move the person from that side to that side. One day, Ofsted came into school and seeing that I was nudging this person, the Ofsted said to the teacher, just move me to the end. And I did. After that, teacher never had no trouble with me at all. Why? Simple. Because he saw that I was a left-hander, put me on the end of the table. So now nobody's not labeling me rude no more, because you've done one thing, move me. But when I ask you to move me, you don't want to move me. But when somebody else asks you to move me, I got moved. So that's why some cases I was labelled. When I left school, I went to live in London. As I said earlier on, I was around people that used to take people's things, drive cars. I used to take stolen, stereos out of people's cars. I used to do things I wasn't proud of. I really, really wasn't proud of. But one day I was sitting in a car and I said to my colleagues, but I used to call them friends at the time, but they weren't friends. I said to them, I've had enough of this. I had enough. And they used to say to me, so what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You don't know nothing. And I used to say, I don't know nothing, but I'm going to become something. And at the time, I never knew what I could become or what I could do. So I took myself and I said, okay then, what can I do? So I heard about the Prince's Trust. And when I heard that somebody could give you money to start a business, I was like, okay, let's try this. All right. How I found out I was dyslexic is by doing a business plan. I thought I was stupid. My sister used to call me stupid and dumb in school. She used to literally make me cry. I cried. I'm a ladies' man. All right. My sister would say to me, oh, my brother's stupid. My brother's dumb. My brother can't read his name on a cake. But I wasn't that bad, but she would say it anyway, just to upset my soul. I was thinking, how can my own sister relate to me like this? So anyway, I'm going to prove it. I proved her wrong now. I sure did. So anyway, when I was on the streets, I would call it on the streets, I was very, very negative. Very. And then I heard about the Prince's Trust, and then I was like, okay then, how can they help me? So I went there and I said, I've got an idea. Is it possible you could help me? They was like, what do you want to do? I was like, I don't really know, but I said I like working with children, and I'm full of energy. So I said, okay, then do a business plan. I said, okay, I'm going to do a business plan. So I started to do the business plan. It was the hardest thing I ever did. As somebody who's not very good at reading, okay, I struggled, but I never give up. I don't give up on anything. I think the reason why I'm here today is determination, sacrifice, and passion. That's what I have. That's what carries me through anything I do. So I created a business called NK Creations, and I work with first of all, I was doing children's parties and entertainment, because I used to like doing things like that. And I was like, this is not going to make me a millionaire, and it's not going to make me successful to my community, to show them, you know what, I'm making a difference. So I created something called Tunes Times Tables. I learnt my times tables when I was 29. So this is a man who doesn't know how to read properly, and I learnt my times tables when I was 29. Now I go around the world teaching adults and children their times tables through music. Thank you. I'll tell you how it's happened, how I created Tunes Times Tables. I was in a school one day as a learning mentor, and a child said to me, what's 8 times 8? I looked at him and said, I don't know. And he looked at me and goes, oh, sir, I don't know his times table, sir, I don't know. I was like, oh my days, okay. Okay, here we go. I'm embarrassed now. I went home and my son was 9 at the time. I said to him, Trey, what's 8 times 8? He looked at me like, Dad, I don't know. I went back to school and I was watching children like this. 1 times 8 is 8. 2 times 8 is 16. I was like, how can I make times tables cool for children and adults. And remember, I don't know my times tables. So I'm like, how can I learn times tables for myself? So I went home with my dyslexic self, but at the time I thought I was stupid or dumb, because that's what I was called, and that's what subliminally it was in my head, because that's what you've been calling me. So I went home, and I got pen to paper. It took 2 years to create. 2 years. And at one stage, I gave up. I said, I'm not doing it. I said, I'm going to go catch. This is what I did. I went out and I was trying to catch people on their mobile phones. Okay, and I was going to call it napcam. Okay, and catch people on their mobile phones. Then I was thinking, how can I do it? Can I sell it to the police? Do I put it on YouTube? Blah, blah, blah. I was thinking, what shall I do? And then I came back, and it's like the creator said to me, that's not what you're supposed to be doing. He said, get back to what you're supposed to be doing. So I started Tombs Times Tables. Tombs Times Tables is one of the best things I've ever created. Ever. I can go into schools and I can teach children their times tables in an hour, like that. I don't know how I do it. I believe that the creator's blessed me to do it. Times tables is one of them things what some of you I know probably don't know them. And I wouldn't be embarrassed if you said you don't, because it's one of them things where if it sticks in your head, it does. If it don't, it don't. Some people probably just wheel off them like this. I wasn't one of them. So anyway, Tombs Times Tables was created. After Tombs Times Tables was created, the challenge was to get it into schools. For me to get into schools. Remember, I'm the person who's the black sheep of the family now. Okay, what? Okay, you with me. So I was the brown sheep of the family. My auntie says, you will never ever get into schools. This is my auntie. Why? The way I dress. I wear a hat, a do-rag, and I don't wear my trousers down to my pants. I don't do that. But I dress, like, today I'm a bit more casual. But yeah, my auntie said I'll never get into there, and that disheartened me, knowing what I could do. So I said, how does somebody like me, brown-skinned man, get into schools and prove to people that I can teach adults and children? I did. I give it away for free, just to show people. I went into schools. I said, I can do this. It was like, okay, you'll see. I went into schools, and I showed them. People couldn't believe it. I had white people, Asian people, black people, or brown-skinned people looking at me. I'm with ya. Okay, I had them looking at me and thinking, how is this man doing this to our children? Meaning getting them to recite. Because, you see, the thing is, it's not just about the times tables. It's about building their confidence. Because people don't know that. When you don't know something, you're lacking confidence and self-esteem. That's what I was lacking, because somebody's always telling me I'm dumb and stupid. Already? Okay, so 5 minutes left already. Sorry. All right, so I'm going to go on. So I got it into schools, cut a story short. I really did. It was one of the best things I ever did, and a challenge. I also, being as I'm from the streets, I don't really like networking, because on the streets, you don't network. The only thing you do is network on the corners, or the shops, or blah, blah. You don't really network. And I found it very, very difficult to network with white people, Asian people, and my own brown-skinned people, because I'm used to or accustomed to doing what I'm normally doing. So that was a challenge in itself, to be able to interact with people who were well-spoken than me. I don't believe that anybody's better than me, and I'm not better than nobody. I really am not. However, I believe that I was lacking so much skills and abilities at the time, where I put myself in a turtle. A turtle, when you just put your head out now and again. So it was like that. So I had a lot of difficulties literally communicating with people. And even today, sometimes when I'm here, I always say to people, why are you inviting me? I always say that to people, why are you inviting me? But they must see my potential. I think sometimes I do lack confidence in, or my belief that, I'm very, very successful. I've been to Houses of Parliament with Tombs Times Tables. I've been GMTV with my Tombs Times Tables. I've won Pride of Britain with my Tombs Times Tables. And I'm actually now working with Anton Deck's agent. I'm working with a TV company to get me on TV to create my own Tombs Times Tables. But I could go on, but I'm just going to give you a sample of the Tombs Times Tables, because I've only got about 30 seconds. 1 minute left. So I'm going to give you a little sample. All right, there's many things more for me to say, but I never knew 20 minutes was just going to go just like that.
I can squeeze an extra minute out there.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the 7 times tables goes like this. 1 times 7 is 7. Who knows someone in heaven? 2 times 7 is 14. You can be brainy and sporty. 3 times 7 is 21. If you don't keep up, you're gonna. 4 times 7 is 28. Tell the teachers, don't be late. 5 times 7 is 35. 35 makes you feel alive. 6 times 7 is 42. Bye-bye, baby, toodaloo. 7 times 7 is 89. Don't tell lies, it's 49. 8 times 7 is 56. Stamp them feet and shake them hips. 9 times 7 is 63. If I can do it, so can we. 10 times 7 is 70. Can you feel that energy, that melody that gets to me? Tunes times tables get the best of me. I have children as young as 4 and 5 knowing their 9s, 8s and 7s and 12 times tables. And before I leave, the other day, I went into a school with children with disabilities, special needs. I had teachers crying of the impact I did with and the work I did with the children. They couldn't believe me. When I went there, they said, Clifford, could you teach them their 2s, 5s and 10s? And I was like, can I teach them their 7s, 8s and 12s? She goes, woo! And I did. I can teach anybody. From I can learn it, anybody can learn it. And I have to say, I would love to speak further, but I've got to go. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Clifford. One thing I realised as you were speaking was that I didn't actually give Glenys an opportunity to take questions. So perhaps if we can take any questions for Clifford first. We've just got the 5 minutes, and then if we have a bit more time, there might be some specific questions for Glenys. So does anyone have any questions for Clifford? Right. 1, 2, 3. Okay. You put your hand up. No, Linton. You put your hand up. No, sorry, Glenn. Linton, just behind you.
No, I was just simply saying someone.
Oh, you were doing that, were you? Okay. All right. So we've got 1, 2. Yeah.
I wanted to know if you have it on CD.
Yeah, that's great. I have it on.
Sell CDs.
I sell CDs. I'm in the process of creating DVDs, and I'm also in the process of creating the first educational musical.
That's good.
I would like to have one of the CDs. I grew up on Schoolhouse Rock,
Okay.
which is similar, using music to learn your timetables and your verbs and pronouns.
No problem. The CD is available. You can get it off www.tunestimestables.com.
Very good.
Firstly, I would like to say that it was a very inspiring speech, and I really feel very motivated. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
And my question to you is that coming up with an idea for the tune times table, teaching the kids, how does it feel? Does it give you a sense of satisfaction?
It really does. When you go into school and you see children underachieving, okay, and I make the children from bottom of the class, top of the class, and I always say, why should you have 5 at the top and the rest at the bottom? And I go into schools and I make children bottom go to top. I've literally been to schools, all right, or children have come to my personal workshops, all right, and children have to do the test again because they're like, no. How did you get that? How did you get 12 out of 12? How did you get 60 out of 60? So it's definitely one of the best feelings ever. Best ever feeling. Thank you. Oh, yeah. I'm glad you said that. I earn more money than her now. And, all right, I think she's very, very proud of me, but she doesn't call me stupid and dumb no more. You know, and you know the thing is too. When I'm in schools, I always say to children that my sister used to call me stupid and dumb. It doesn't matter what people call you. It's what's in your head and your heart. You know what I mean? So people might say you're black this, you're black that. That doesn't mean nothing to me no more. You know, I'm from the streets. I have people saying we're black, we're never gonna get there, or we're brown, we're never gonna get there. Yes, you can. It's all up here and here. You know what I mean? Words doesn't mean nothing. If you wanna take these words and make it stop you, that's your business. But you can be anything you want. I haven't even started yet. When I won Pride of Britain, I said I'm like an Elvis Presley and a Bob Marley. I'm not going nowhere. Okay.
Sure.
Just one, you mentioned about the streets and growing up, and I think it's kind of a negative experience. But I always believe that through all the negative, you can learn something. What do you think you learned the most over there?
On the street.
What did you learn? And what did it know you?
You know, I've learnt the people on the streets, they are very, very talented, but you know what? Very lazy. Very lazy. I have a lot of people either dead in jail or on drugs, but you know what? I know a lot of people that sell drugs, and I believe that they are the most talented people ever. But you know what? They're not giving them themselves a chance. And I've learned that, you know, they're up at some silly times doing some ridiculous things. I'm saying, you know what? If you put that effort and that time into your business, you know how far you would get and be successful. And I mean, and they look at me and they're like, I do understand, but they haven't got passion for anything. So until somebody gives them that passion and the drive, they can do it. You know what I mean? But I've learned that, you know what? People on the streets are not, they're just lazy. That's all it is. Just lazy. I've learned that. Thank you, the Christian.
You mentioned the passion with people on the streets. What do you think is going to give them that passion? Can you think of any?
Having something to look up to. You know, I think there's a lot of people, there's a lot of men out there that don't have no role models. And as I said earlier on, I looked up to the wrong people. You know what I mean? But I think why I changed my life is because something dramatic happened to me. But I think until something happens to them or happens to people on the street, that's when they can change their lives. But it is literally for them to see that there's more out there, because they don't see anything out there, because they're always ended up in one place. I know people that don't even want to come off this road to go on another road. Yeah. So if you're just stuck like that, you're not seeing anything.
But is there anything that the society can do to help that? And is it all with them?
It's all, the thing, I believe it's all with them. My opinion, because if I can change, they can change. I'm no better than them. I know some of them who are selling drugs, okay, and they can read better than me, they can write better than me, and I'm like, why are you still doing this? So it's just about them. It's just about them finding their need to make a difference.
Could we take any questions for Glenys before we move on? Okay, so 1, 2, and 3, 4.
Okay.
Yeah. Sure.
Thank you. Actually, an encounter with your friend Una King in a lift was a very strange but beautiful encounter.
Oh my God.
Tell me, come on, I share a room with her. Give me something to hold over,
I found a very honest person. I found a very inspirational person herself. But actually, our conversation, I walked into a bicycle. Our conversation, she wasn't as, shall I say, complimentary, or perhaps she wasn't as positive as you seem to be about probably what I would call, party politics culture, which I think is actually what I could probably describe as institutional racism in a sense. And this tends to be very visible around election time when suddenly the conversation changes. The rest of the year you wonder, where are these immigrants? And then suddenly we come out of the cracks and the rocks, and they become, the thing that everyone is running on. And Labour, particularly, I think really in the last 10-year cycle, has really lost it, because it was the party that tended to speak for, underrepresented folk like immigrants. We're all painted with the same brush. And I wonder, what's your view on that? The party seems to have lost its base in terms of the support, and in terms of actually the honesty in this whole immigration discourse.
I think one of the strengths of Una and also Doreen Lawrence is that they hold the Labour Party's feet to the fire, and that's exactly what they should be doing. So she would almost certainly, were she here, be much fiercer than I have been, and that's that. And why wouldn't she be, actually? Because she's had those experiences and I have not. And I think you're right. As we get closer to the election, that the amount of noise about immigration and those issues is going to get much louder, particularly because of UKIP and because of them conflating issues to do with Europe, people who come here to work from Europe, as well as the other issues to do with immigration. I think that it's taken a while for the Labour Party to get to be coherent about immigration, but I think we are actually more coherent. If you look at what Yvette Cooper's been saying in the last period, you will see that she's certainly challenging the government about their things like those terrible vans that they sent round in London. I mean, you know, and all of those sorts of things. And also trying to find a way through to having something which is coherent and fair. So, I mean, I personally think that we need to take students out of our immigration tallying. It's ridiculous. I'm the governor of the LSE, so I would say that, wouldn't I? Because half of our students are overseas students. This can only damage Britain, damage our universities, damage our higher education system, and actually it does a terrible damage in those countries where we want to attract students, in the Indian subcontinent, in Africa, because we're so unwelcoming. So we have got to change. We've got to change those issues, and we have got to be coherent. And I don't think we're quite there yet, but we certainly have to be. And some of us are fighting quite hard internally to make sure we get there.
Thank you. I know there are other questions for Glenys, but could you just hang on to those for the
I'll try
panel?
not to be quite so long-winded.
Yes, that was the longest lead-in to a question I've heard for some time. So I'd like to ask Khadija to give us another one of her wonderful readings.
Thank you.
Okay, last short poem. But I just wanted to mention very quickly, just wanted to thank Mr. NK just about reminding us about colour. When I told people my magazine's called Sable, some said they look at me and think, why has she called it Sable? And they don't want to ask me. Some people do. And basically it's because sable is a very rich, luxuriant, glorious brown. Yeah. And that's what I see my skin colour as.
Yes.
There we go. And that's why the magazine is Sable, because I think it represents us as being rich, beautiful, brown, luxuriant. And sable is a mixture of browns. We are not one brown. We are, when I worked in the makeup business, 32 shades of us. There's only 7 shades of white. There's 32 shades of us. Okay. Lorry driver. I was raised with English foster parents. And I was very lucky. I had very good foster parents. And this is from that kind of experience. Lorry driver. Pete's Cafe was our halfway stop on the motorway. Dad carried me in, chocolate button, half asleep, sat me up on a wooden bench on 2 cushions, propping bum and legs. Served yolky egg, pork sausage, fried white bread, baked beans, and tomatoes pushed to the edge on a chipped white plate. Mug of tea with 2 sugars to dip butter toast in before being carried back like Santa Claus's sack burping. I sat in my warm nest between me dad, the driver, and the other passenger, me brother. My half-term holiday treat.
Thanks again, Khadija. I'd like to introduce Henry Bonsu. Henry is director and presenter on Colourful Radio.
No longer.
Was director and presenter on Colourful Radio, and he hasn't updated his resume. It was a speech-based digital station aimed at Europe's African and Caribbean communities.
That's funny.
Perhaps best known as the man axed for being too intellectual. He's been a journalist since 1990, working on BBC radio and TV programmes, including Today, World at One, Public Eye and Black Britain. For 2 years, he anchored the Drive Time news programme on BBC London, interviewing politicians, business people and celebs. He's written for The Times, The Mail, on Sunday, The Daily Express, The Voice, New Nation, Pride magazine and the London Evening Standard. So it's a very distinguished table, isn't it, folks, that we've got here. But Henry, can I invite you to come and address the
Very much indeed. Yeah. There are a number of profiles of me out there in cyberspace which need to be deleted. I need to talk to Google to get rid of them because they're somewhat out of date. I
hope I chose a decent one.
Well, it was from, I think, 2008. So,
okay.
But that's all right. No, there are lots of different profiles.
Delete that from the
I'll
video.
delete that from the wiki as well. It's a privilege to be here in front of you. I do a lot of public speaking in this country and overseas. I'm a very, very, very lucky man, especially when I hear your story, Clifford. Because I know guys who've gone through what you've been through and they haven't been able to turn their lives around. Some of them are 6 feet under, either in this country or Nigeria or Jamaica. I grew up in Manchester. My parents were not privileged in the sense that they came from a very, very middle-class home in Ghana. They were born in Ghana. Came to this country, my dad, in 1961. My mum, he said, I came to London initially to pave the way for her, to smooth the path. Then I sent for her and she followed me. That is when women used to obey their husbands. Now, things have changed somewhat, he said. They were meant to be here for 5 years. 53 years later, in Manchester, where I was born. My younger brother and I were born in Manchester. My sister and my older brother were born here in Leeds. So there's a connection with the wrong side of the Pennines.
The right side.
I've spent a long time in broadcasting, in media, doing radio, television, news and current affairs for BBC, Channel 4, Sky, Al Jazeera, and a range of other broadcasters and writing for newspapers. I'm a very, very lucky man. I get to interview people like Baroness Lawrence, people like Baroness King. I was with Baroness Lawrence yesterday, interviewing her in front of the African and Caribbean network of Accenture, which is a massive company in the city of London. The day before that, I was interviewing 3 African presidents and a prime minister at the Savoy Hotel. This is a Global African Investment Summit. Last week, I was in Paris and Deauville at the Women's Forum, hosting the Cartier Women's Initiative Awards. And last month, I was at the United Nations doing a couple of events at the General Assembly. So I'm very, very, very lucky. I'm not a very good student. I was very, very good at primary school because of lashings from my father and my mother. They believed in sparing the rod and spoiling. Okay. So fueled by that mixture of a desire to please my parents, and fear, I did very, very well at primary school, very well at secondary school. Then when I escaped their clutches, I got into higher education, I bombed. I didn't do well at all. However, because of that mixture of, desire to please my parents, and the fact that I enjoyed schoolwork. I enjoyed my maths, my English, my Latin, my German, my French. So I went to Magdalen College, Oxford, alma mater of Boris Johnson, William Hague, and George Osborne, the Chancellor. But I wasn't comfortable, really, because I was still very much a Manchester guy from a place called Cheetham Hill, just north of Salford, which some of you will know, very, very, very deprived area. But the way in which I was able to transcend my circumstances was because although it was deep inner city Manchester, my parents considered it to be Accra in Ghana. Out there is Cheetham Hill, inside here is Accra, where we don't believe in this kind of Manchester drifting ne'er-do-well culture. They were very, very clear about who I was and what I was about. They said, you come from a long line of princely people. They were very, very clear that although you were born and raised in Manchester, your line goes back hundreds or more years. So don't be fooled by images that you see of Africa. We are much better than that. And that helped to give me a degree of confidence, both in my academic studies. I went to a very, very, very white English school called St. Bede's College in Manchester. The motto was, Nunquam otio torpebat. How are you going to sign that? He's signing in Latin. Nunquam otio torpebat means never be seen in torpor, never be seen idling. So that was the motto, and I carried it forward. I managed to get into Magdalen College because I happened to be very, very good at German and French, although I didn't really enjoy the subjects as they were taught in university. And one of the problems I had was one of socialization, and I suspect it's a problem for many young people when they get into higher education. Because it's one thing to be good academically on paper, but when you get into the higher education environment, you're much freer than you were, especially if you had a cordon sanitaire around you in Accra, Manchester. Because you're free to go around, to drink, to work or not to work. And I didn't handle the freedom very well. So I got a degree popularly known as a Desmond, as opposed to a Jeff Hurst. Jeff Hurst is a first, I think, and a Desmond is a tutu. And I was tipped for a first. I just didn't handle my freedom very well indeed. But I managed to come back to Manchester having finished the Oxford 4 years, and I decided I wanted to be a journalist because I'd written a couple of pieces in the student newspaper and I saw the power of the word. People who didn't really think I was worth very much, but when I wrote about my experiences as a person of African origin in the ivory towers of Oxford, people go, oh my God, is that how it was for you? That's an amazing piece, you should do more of this. So when I went back to Manchester, I then managed to get a traineeship at a local paper, and then I wrote for the Manchester Evening News, The Voice, and then went down to the BBC to work on a programme called Breakfast News with Nicholas Witchell and the late Jill Dando. It's going back a very, very long time. Then I moved on to the Today programme on Radio 4. And then I went through the gears. Problem with a lot of these very big institutions, corporate institutions, whether in the private sector or the public sector, is that they often only recognise one kind of talent. The kind of talent they recognise comes in what I would call a normative form. See, I'm going to get all academic and use your kind of language, you know. And what Grayson Perry, the Turner Prize winner, is it even the Turner Prize, Grayson Perry, calls a default man. And default man comes in a particular image. And if I can just use this. I do a lot of... That's default man, the guy on my left, your right. Well. Lord Digby Jones. If you can just pause that for a second. I'm not the greatest academic in the world, but I do talk a lot about education because it's extremely important and it feeds into all the equalities and inequalities that we see beyond the ivory tower, beyond the universities. And that's why I try to talk about it a lot when I'm on television. This is about a couple of weeks ago. I do a show called the BBC Paper Review, once, twice a month sort of thing, either on BBC or sometimes on Sky. And it's 2 15-minute chunks, and they pair me with someone like Digby Jones because they want a political variety and diversity on air. And you see that piece was in the Telegraph. For a place at Oxbridge, start with 2 A stars. And before we went on air, Digby was saying, oh God, it's political correctness gone mad. What's wrong with 2 A stars at Oxford? Should be 3 A stars. It shouldn't be dumbing down. It should be about meritocracy. He's from Birmingham, by the way. That wasn't a very good Birmingham accent. But still. So I'm saying default man comes in the guise of Digby, and it's about a certain kind of confidence some people have, a certain kind of ability to bluster their way through it. David Cameron has it, okay? Ed Miliband has it, and Nick Clegg certainly has it. It means, although these people have a degree of talent, they're able to punch above their weight because of this kind of noblesse oblige. They think almost they're born to lead. They may know far less than you or you or you, but because they carry themselves in a certain way. And I've met all 3 of those. I met Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, and they all walk like that, just like George W. Bush. Because they want to fill the room. And the challenge for people in higher education is that you must fill the young people in your charge with real, genuine confidence. And unfortunately, a lot of universities tend to dismantle rather than build up. You've got to find ways of boosting the confidence. If somebody comes in with street confidence, you've got to blend that with another kind of confidence they can take to the doors of Accenture or JP Morgan or the DFID or the Foreign Office or any of these places, so they can stand up and talk without feeling deep down they shouldn't really be there. So when I go onto television, even if I don't know as much as someone like Digby Jones, I've got to hold my own, especially when talking about education. But sometimes default man can still win. And I wasn't at my best on this, but I still show it to you, just to show you what the dynamics are at play. Can we show? So we're talking about university entrance. Look at Digby, ready. Ready.
I think the reason why this is a story is because the Telegraph, and there are lots of those papers, fear that there's been an attempt by central government, by the Office for Fair Access, to try and, turn universities against, the elite colleges like Eton and the places where middle-class people send their children. And I think the reason why the Daily Times is very excited about this is it's a reassurance, i.e., we're not dumbing down, there's not going to be declining standards, widening participation isn't going to mean lots of undeserving working class kids getting bumped up for social engineering. Why have you used the word undeserving working class in the same sense? The reason why I say that is
Socialist bigot. Whoa!
exactly why I use the word. You're very bad, you've got a chip on both.
Such a patronising git.
Please do not use the word working class in the same way. You've abolished the term working class. Why? Because it doesn't apply to guys working 24/7 on the line at Jaguar Land Rover who are paying middle-class income tax rates. Yes, they are. They're not working class. Some of them are. The working class isn't just about the money, the part of it. It's about the state of mind. It's about socialist bigotry. No, it's about the state of mind. Okay. The next trail that we make.
We can stop that one there. So you see what I'm up against. You see? You see what I'm up against.
Blame Tony Blair.
Well, this is it. Well, Tony Blair put him in the House of Lords, wasn't it? It was the Gordon Brown, government of all the talents. So I do that for a living. So I do that, and I also do a lot of conferences. I host conferences here in the UK, sometimes at the United Nations, the EU. Thank you very much indeed. But what I always try and do, though, is never forget who I am. I'll often wear my Ghanaian clothes in a TV, it didn't on that day, but in a TV studio. And my mum was so concerned that it would, and here's what she actually said: Henry, you're going to alienate white people. I'll say it again. You're going to alienate white people. I said, Mum, why? But Henry, but it looks too different, the colours and everything. I said, Mum, you came from Mother Ghana. You had me here. Surely you should be proud that I'm presenting a rounded, hopefully intelligent Africanness, smashing the stereotypes they have of us, of us not being clever, not being able to think deeply, not being able to think first, second, third stage, and only good enough to win gold medals and score goals. Important though those things are in forging a cohesive, unified modern Britain in 2012. It's about much more than that. And so I used to wear my Ghanaian clothes on the right stuff, and I would often get stopped on the street by both brown people and pink people, because nobody's white. You see? Do you use that one? Sit that in your pipe and smoke it. No. I do that deliberately because although I am a failed higher education student, I still feel that in my core. Education first and last. Well before Tony Blair coined the phrase education, 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 because my parents taught me that in the late 60s when I was born. I know you thought I was born in 1983, but no, I was born in the late 60s. And that was what my parents taught me. You know what my father used to say? She said, this colour thing, if you work very, very, he said, not just very hard, very, 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 very hard, the colour will wash off. That's what he said to me. That's genuinely my father, he's 74. No, he said that because in his world, in his mind, if you are of African, Caribbean or Asian origin, that you had no option but to do that. You would have to go to higher education. You must get your degree, and you must show other people that you are as worthy, if not worthier, than your counterpart. We're getting to the point now where in some campuses, of course, we're seeing 40% of the student population, undergraduate population, quote, BME. But what about the retention rates? What about the access into jobs? Something is not working. Also, as I was leaving Leeds on the way, sorry, I was entering Leeds on the way over here, I saw Paul Gilroy, eminent professor, eminent social scientist, theorist. But he's had problems at some of our great institutions in this country. I told him I was coming here. And he's very, very worried about the fact that we're pricing some young people out of higher education, or we're not selling the message properly that actually there is education for all. And also when it comes to people at your level, Kevin, there aren't enough. Why is that? Why is it? What, there's still too much default man in these institutions, as well as in the City of London, as well as in Parliament, both lower and upper houses. We must do something about that. We have to do more. We have to do it better. Thank you.
No, we don't need that. We don't need that. Yeah, time is against us. So,
Thank you, Henry. We have time to take a few questions. Can I get a show of hands? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Somebody who hasn't asked a question yet. Okay, let's start again. 1, 2, 3. Okay, Si.
Yeah, so picking up from Henry's point about getting people into these places, I'm wondering whether there's another way of looking at this, because you all mentioned literacy from the beginning, talking about the person who grew up enslaved, and so maybe we should look at a different form of literacy and look at what skills people have themselves, rather than kind of looking at these institutions being the answer. So looking at the alternatives to the BBC, alternatives to Parliament, alternatives to JP Morgan. So because I think we do undervalue people if you're looking at people being illiterate and being lazy. Then obviously I think that's negating all the circumstances of family, of society, and of real racism. Which stop that. So what do people think about perhaps alternatives to these structures that are out there?
Well, at the moment we're only addressing questions to Henry.
I've got a very quickly one side. I believe in some of those alternatives where viable. That's one of the reasons why I put nearly £100,000 of my own money, and I've never been a banker. That's long term, man. That's taken me years to earn, and then I lost it because colourful radio unfortunately failed for a variety of reasons, not least the advertising world is structured in such a way that if you are coming from a quote marginalised perspective, you're not part of global radio, it's very, very hard to get the advertising, it's very, very hard to get the high net worth individual to put £1 million, £2 million into your area. Also, digital radio hasn't really taken off in the way it's supposed to. Also, when it comes to the alternatives, yes, if people have got natural talents and we can harness them, but in the end, remember, people, the average person born today is going to be, well, will live to the age of 90 or so. What are they going to do? There are very, very few viable alternative sources of employment that are going to employ and give genuine opportunity to the vast majority of people. I wanted, and I've tried to help develop some of the African-leaning television stations out there, but many of them haven't got the capacity to pay people, and large numbers of them, in order to promote an alternative form of employment, an alternative way of seeing people who look brown and the rest of humanity. That's the thing. So in the years where it's going to take us time to develop the alternative, what do you do? That's the problem.
Two things really. This man that you were talking to, the default man.
Digby, yes. Default Digby.
Yeah. The problem with him is that it was a socialist, well, so-called socialist who elevated him to the House of Representatives.
Terrible thing.
Yeah. And the thing is, he also made him an advisor.
Yes, he did.
And a minister.
Yeah.
Great mistakes. This guy has always been very, very anti-working class.
Yeah.
very, very anti-socialist or anything left of centre.
Yeah.
The second thing is, please don't go around saying tutu is a failure. As an academic, I have to work with students.
I've made a note of that too. You can't.
Yeah,
no,
me too.
no, well.
I got
it's
a
not
tutu.
failure. To get a degree, tutu takes a hell of a lot of hard work.
Thank you for that.
So please,
Because even to this day, I still refuse to graduate.
Outside, to get to university is hard enough.
Yeah.
To say that to get a sort of it's above average degree, because if they get a third or if they get a non-classified degree, that's.
I suppose that's my own personal guilt that I have to deal with because of my upbringing. You know, you carry these things with you.
But they do say that to university. I was told as a tutor basically that I was a failure within university, really.
Well, the great thing is that Mumtaz and I have revalidated you, and your tutus are excellent.
Yeah. But I mean, a lot of it is to do with the social stuff as well.
I thought
you know,
my
it goes up to
tutu
university.
was an absolute miracle, actually.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you for that.
We have another question. Yes. Yeah.
I think I'd just like to pick up on something Henry's talking about. Some universities have 40% BME,
Yeah.
but there's issues about attainment, retention, and just going back to something Baroness Thornton was talking about. As we talk about Oxford, they had this incredible access there, where they had 140 students from BME backgrounds, and I think in some ways what we're looking at, or we're looking at it the wrong way. If you look at McPherson report, it wasn't just about having a go at the Met Police being institutionally racist. It's a wider, it's a broader conversation, and the conversation is about the amount of institutions that are institutionally racist. So what we should be thinking about is looking at the structures that actually create the environment that we're currently talking about. So I think having 40% BME is not the answer. The Met Police getting more BME officers is not the answer. The answer is to look at the structure, see why it's not including, or it's not inclusive to people of colour. I think that's where we should be looking at, not just necessarily getting more numbers in.
Yeah.
We need to work on the structures to allow them to actually succeed within that environment.
Yeah.
And that's where we need to look at.
I agree, and it's a parallel thing. It isn't just looking at, but the numbers are important because they're individuals with opportunities, with jobs, with career progression. It's got to be both. It's absolutely got to be both. The problem is when you talk about reforming institutions, they're so hard in quotes to do. I mean, they're having this conversation in government. They're having this conversation in JP Morgan. They're having this conversation in every major institution. It just depends on which one gets caught out at any time in the news cycle. BBC at the moment. I mean, the BBC is really scared about the attention because Lenny Henry's been raising it, of course, recently. Government is looking at it. Ed Vaizey, the Arts and Culture Minister. They know this problem is not going to go away, and as the quotes BME population rises, and it's rising significantly, they're going to lose their currency in the case of television, which is eyeballs, because people are going to be looking at all the alternatives because they don't see themselves reflected, and they're worried about that long term because history's not on their side.